Hello, guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Unique Items. Today we're going to be going over another one of the new uniques, which is the Axial Conduit. The Axial Conduit is, well, interesting. It definitely turns Chain Lightning into quite an interesting ability for sure. And let's go ahead and put some points into Chain Lightning real quick because I don't actually have that. Actually, you know, I got Shaco on, so I can do it that way. So Axial Conduit has some interesting effects. First off is the up to, 22.5% chance for Chain Lightning projectiles to cast twice, which is going to help you a lot when you're trying to get that double chance, like on your staff or whatever, or if you want to use a unique item, which is going to consume one of those two slots. That's definitely going to help out. Also, we have a pretty healthy damage reduction on here of 15%, which, of course, all this can be masterworked, and you can get even higher percentages on these. So looking for some greater affix and masterworking can definitely enhance this a lot. We also have a resource generation and maximum of 32.5% total, which is freaking amazing. So that's going to bring up your resource maximum. So I got 130 right now. I'm going to put these pants on. As you can see now, I'm at 162. So they give me a pretty nice bonus to my maximum amount of resource, which you're going to need for this build because you really need a huge amount of maximum resource. We'll talk about that later. It also gives you bonus to Chain Lightning specifically, which is, of course, is going to help out with your Chain Lightning damage. Now, the real meat and potatoes of this is the unique effect. And the unique effect is Chain Lightning alternates between orbiting you and seeking up to 3 enemies. When it returns, it drains 6 mana from you for each active Chain Lightning. After draining 66 total mana, the bolt explodes, dealing up to 26,472 damage. And it's lightning damage, of course, which is what you're going to be scaling. Chain Lightning expires if you don't have enough mana for it to drain, and this is very important because if you overextend with the number of potential casts, it can potentially cause catastrophic issues. For instance, let's go ahead and put the pants back on, and you'll see that I currently have a total mana pool of 162. So if I have a cast of 6 mana, each Chain Lightning, of course, is 6 mana, divided into my total mana, which is currently 162, then I get 162 divided by 6, which gives me a total of 27 flat Chain Lightnings, which means that if I have more than 27 active at any given time, and it's going to pull my entire pool, and I'm not going to be able to maintain this. So this basically means, like, for instance, if I have 28 times 6, that's going to be 168 mana, and I don't have 168 mana. No matter how high my regeneration is, no matter how fast I'm restoring my mana, no matter what abilities I'm using, I will not be able to overcome the loss of basically all of that mana all at one time. Now this means that when this happens, the Chain Lightning will expire if you don't have enough mana for it to drain, and so it's going to simply disappear. And let's take off Tyraels for clarity reasons here. So the way that it works is you're going to shoot it off, and it's going to bounce back and forth between you. It's going to spin around you in a circle, and it's going to do this multiple times. And every single time it bounces off of you, it's going to basically just do this thing back and forth until it reaches 66 mana. Now, if you cast multiple of these, it goes faster. And it reaches that 66 mana at a faster rate. As you can see, it's draining pretty much all of my mana out from existence. And of course, it killed itself when it reached the maximum amount. So one of the goals of this particular build for this particular set of items is you want as much maximum resource as you can to increase this. So you're definitely going to be looking at things like the maximum bonus here, which is Devastation, which is going to give you an increase to your maximum mana. You're also going to want maybe things like the Harlequin Crest Shaco, which give you maximum resource. You probably also would like maximum resource in other ways. Now, the other thing is that maximum resource by itself is not going to be enough because you're going to burn that up relatively quickly as you cast multiple Chain Lightnings. And it's going to continually consume more and more of that mana to the point where eventually you're going to exceed the total amount. Now, the majority of the damage that's being done here is actually being done through the explosions and not actually the Chain Lightning itself. So if you stand really close to a target like this, you'll notice that it just pulls my mana really fast. But we want it to pull the mana. There's also some things that you kind of want to avoid. So one of the problems with this is that it has to bounce back to you in order to cause the explosion. So it obviously needs to do this routine. So it needs to hit the target, then it needs to bounce back to you, spin around you, and then bounce back to the target. And it needs to do this enough times until it consumes 66 mana. At which point, when it consumes 66 mana, it explodes, dealing a massive amount of damage on the target. If you use aspects like the one that makes Chain Lightning bounce more, it will not explode as often because it will spend too much time bouncing between monsters and not enough time actually, like bouncing back to you, which means that you'll get the explosions. And this is really important in the way that this ability works because you don't want that aspect. Increasing the damage of Chain Lightning itself isn't necessarily the main goal here because the main goal is actually to maintain your mana pool so that you can get as many explosions as you possibly can. And this becomes a war of figuring out exactly how many Chain Lightnings that you can have active at any given time. For instance, you can see down here it shows that I currently had 4 active, and I was able to completely consume all of my mana at that point. However, if I do, say, 3 instead of 4, I did 4 instead. I got the double cast, which makes it a little bit more difficult to know exactly how many you're casting. So let's try this again. Let's get our mana back up to full. And we're going to cast 3. So 1. There we go. 3. Now I can maintain 3. 3 is maintainable, as you can see. It didn't completely overwhelm my mana. Now, when you're going to have to do is you're going to have to focus on ways to restore your mana. The 6 mana that it is draining cannot be mitigated by resource reduction. And this is important. They did state this, and it also doesn't actually work. So, for instance, things like Ring of the Star of the Sky, which reduces the resource cost of things, isn't necessarily going to work with the Chain Lightning, the damage from the actual ability, or the mana damage from the actual ability. So the 6 mana that's coming from this is not going to be affected by Ring of Star of the Skies or other resource reductions. However, Ring of the Star of the Skies will, however, help with reducing the cost of Chain Lightning itself. As you can see, Chain Lightning is currently at 9 on my character, and if I cast it multiple times, I can eventually get Chain Lightning down to a cost of only 5 mana per cast, which is one way out of many ways that you can potentially reduce the effect of draining your mana. Because obviously, if you're spamming the Chain Lightning skill itself, that's also going to be a drain on your mana pool. So having that eliminated from the equation can help. There are many ways on the Sorceress that you can increase your mana regeneration, which is really what you want to do, and also restore mana at the same time. So one way is Ice Armor. Ice Armor has a pretty nice 30% mana regeneration when Ice Armor is active. So keeping Ice Armor active can definitely help you keep that mana full. Another way is the Conjurations. You can get a pretty nice 6% mana regeneration for each active Conjuration, which is going to stack up to a very nice 6, 12, and then 18. So you're going to get a very nice 18% mana regeneration just for maintaining your 3 Conjurations, which is certainly not terrible. On top of this, you can also get mana regeneration through the Enhanced Firewall, which is enemies take, right here, 5% increased mana regeneration per active firewall, up to 35%. Which is pretty nice. And then on top of that, we also have the Fiery Surge, which is killing a burning enemy. Increases your mana regeneration by 15% for 3 seconds. So as long as the enemy was burning at some point, you can get mana regeneration that way as well. And there are definitely a myriad of ways, even through the Paragon board, that you can potentially get some regeneration also. And if I remember correctly, there's a... pretty sure there's one in here that specifically gives you a 6.7% regeneration. I might actually be using it, actually. Let me see. Yes. After spending 50 mana, you deal 8% increased damage and 25% increased mana regeneration for 3 seconds. You're probably going to want to take that as well. And then on top of that, I know there's another one in here too. Where is... Because I want to show you guys all the different ways that you can potentially get yourself mana regeneration for this. And you're going to need as much mana regeneration as you can muster. Because basically the way that this ability works is it's going to consume essentially every single bit of mana that you have. And the more mana that you can pull out of your character, the more mana regeneration and the higher your mana pool is, the broader and the better that overall effect is going to be. In other words, you're going to be able to cast more chain lightnings, and the more chain lightnings you can cast, the more explosions you get, and the more explosions you get, the more damage you can do. And of course, if you set this up properly, you can totally fix this entirely by just getting as much mana regeneration and as high of a mana pool as you possibly can, so that you can get as many casts of chain lightning out at a time as possible. Also, this one here, which is static surge, gives you a after spending 27 mana, your next cast of chain lightning or charge bolts makes the enemy vulnerable and restores 10% of your mana. That's another way that you could potentially get mana back. There's also a really nice aspect, which is definitely one that you may want to consider with this, is that the chain lightning bounce aspect, and I'm going to bring this one up too to show you. The chain lightning bounce aspect basically gives you mana back every single time chain lightning bounces, and the chain lightning bounces are going to restore, I think it's 3 if I remember correctly. Let's pull this one up as well. So if we're using the recharging aspect, there it is. Yeah, so we get 3 mana every single time lightning bounces, which that one's chain lightning is going to give you a pretty decent amount back. So looking at the Axial Conduit pants, it says that they will seek up to 3 enemies, which means they're going to bounce up to 3 times, which means you're going to get 3, 6, 9 mana back basically for each bounce, which can somewhat deal with the mana drain, but not entirely on its own. It's definitely one of the best aspects that you're going to get, though, to help you with dealing with a lot of the problems with like the bounces costing 6 mana per time. There's also a lot of ways you can increase your chain lightning damage directly too. You can get the lightning rod aspect, which is pretty nice. This is the one that I advise you that you do not take, because the additional bounces or the additional chains can prevent the explosion on the Axial Conduit by slowing down the overall progression of the explosions and making the damage just feel worse in general. I tested out both, and it just doesn't really work very well with this aspect. In general, these pants are definitely a really high popular one this season. As you play around with them, you're going to find out that it's really not just about holding down the button. It's about knowing exactly how many chain lightnings you can have out at any given time, based on your current setup, your current regeneration, your current, output, and then, like not going over that. Because as soon as you go over the amount that you can fire off at any given time, your damage is going to go down tremendously, because all your chain lightnings are going to expire immediately if you don't have enough mana for it to drain, which is interesting. Overall, they are an amazing pair of pants that I think chain lightning sorceresses are going to have a lot of fun with. They also have a flavor text, don't they? Let's see. The flavor text is, do not confuse your manipulation of lightning as control. The Azure Flame is its own master and needs no hand to wield it. You are merely a conduit for its chaos, ascribed to the Mage of Woe. Now, these pants do drop from a very specific boss, so if you want to farm them, you farm them at Grigore right here. So Hall of the Penitent, which is right south of Kedbardu. So if you kill Grigore, which does require the living steels, you can generally get yourself a pair of Axial Conduits relatively quickly. Obviously, there are a lot of ways that these pants can be enhanced, and if you can find a greater affix on some of the modifiers here, I think they become a hell of a lot better. Like a greater affix on the chain lightning projectiles twice would be massive. A greater affix on the 15% damage reduction would be massive. And also, in my opinion, I think the strongest thing for this particular piece of pair of pants, because of the way that the ability works, consuming mana and needing a larger maximum mana pool, the 32.5% maximum mana, not the resource generation so much, although that's nice, the 35 to 2.5% maximum mana getting a greater affix roll and potentially being masterworked is probably going to give you the greatest leeway to spam more chain lightnings, because you're going to have a bigger pool, and a bigger pool means more chain lightnings. It means more regeneration. It means just in general having the ability to have more explosions, which means more damage, which translates out to just a stronger item in general. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, even when we're just talking about a silly pair of chain lightning pants. And if you enjoy the videos, be sure to hit the like button and the subscribe button, and keep watching.